I wanted to say that death wishes are passed down. They are passed down to us. Inheritance is culturing. Culturing is what you hear people say to you, what they believe. We are cultured by what we are open to as children and vulnerable to. We're vulnerable to all kinds of, let's say, communicational realities, unconscious and conscious, and in rare cases, superconscious impressions. So, yes. So, the death wish, because it's part of our life, is definitely part of living. And it's handed down and reinforced in different ways. And some people are willing to die in very specific ways and not in other ways.
Chapter 140 is titled Dying into Light. How does practicing purification in life aid someone in the death process?
Well, practice, in terms of, let's say, the teachings of the Masters, is a form of understanding life and death as a rare opportunity to progress, and reach a higher state of consciousness, not just, let's say, a physical state, and not just an emotional or normal human state, but, ordinary, even advanced intelligence. We're talking now about a spiritual state of consciousness that is much more in tune with certain individuals' evolutionary, let's say, programming and becomingness, in terms of higher states of consciousness, creatively speaking, and then in terms of cosmic intelligence. I don't mean astrophysics, that's a form of physical cosmic intelligence, and then we have more psychic cosmic intelligence, and then we have more spiritual cosmic intelligence, transcending Earth and transcending planets, transcending the physical universe altogether. So this is part of our process here. Practicing understanding the nature of the universe, which then makes it easier for you to pass on and progress, because you're not afraid of dying under ordinary conditions as if it's any kind of end. It's part of a continuum that's infinite. I mean, if we're going to say anything about the earth being infinite, we should be real about it. Yes, it's infinite. Life is infinite. And we're part of that infinite life, so what are you afraid of? What is anybody afraid of relative to, a form, any form? We are the universe. The heart is the universe is the heart. And so that's a cosmic, let's say, intuitive understanding of our nature as being timeless beings. Space beings in time bodies, in a time universe, but not, let's say, limited to that. Not even determined by that, beyond the point. So practice is embracing death and embracing life as a form of self-liberation, moment-to-moment self-liberation, regardless of what death appears to be or what it seems to be as an end point. Because it's not an end point, as much as a transfer point.
Chapter 141 is titled Spiritual Practice is the Path of No Regrets. Are we all forced to confront our worst fears during the death process?
Some will confront their worst fears, and that's what they bring. They carry through their whole life, their worst fears. People, cultivate these worst fears, until they have some degree of enlightenment. And sometimes that takes the need to know beyond your worst fears. You need to know what's true about your own fears. You need to know what's true about you. But we also bring into the death process our best hopes and our potential for awakening and liberation. So you have both the dark scenarios and then you have brilliant scenarios. Peace at last. I'm not saying we're talking about suicidal ideations relative to death. This is going to be the big release, and I have to assume that, and I'm going to take my own life because I can't wait for it to go any other way.
Which is more frightening and or painful to most spirit beings, entering the death process or taking birth?
Always death is more painful, because we don't know what that is. So always death. It's more painful to sort for people. See? It's not about taking birth. There's something positive about that. Taking birth, new life. There's something promising in that concept. See? But death is always, for most people, unenlightened people, death is always a problem. See? It's like lights out. See? Instead of lights on, but it's also lights on. Very lights on. See? Awakening. Yeah, go ahead.
Chapter 142 is titled Sleep to Life and Awaken to Death. Do most beings experience a period of sleep before birth and after death?
Well, there is such a thing as the bardos, right? The in-betweens. So, and that's relative to your karma, relative to your state of mind. Whatever that is, that's not something we can know in fine detail, quantify, particularly for anybody. Okay? Because there's no real time in the way that we know it in the physical body, in the subtle worlds. Time is something else. See? Time is its own thing in other worlds. And that much we need to tolerate, because we don't know that for sure, since we're more or less bound to the reality of one world, and it's, because of its density, because of its very nature as material, subject to its own, let's say, perception of space and time, matter and energy, and mind.
So are you saying then that there's no limit to how long that period could last?
No limit. And who cares? Because it is what it is, and it's going to be determined by law anyway, so there's nothing you can do about it. So there's no guarantee. You can't go in there and say, well, I know how long I'm going to stay in this bardo, so I got it down, I can handle it, I'm ready for it. Doesn't work that way. Go ahead.
Do spirits who need to take birth just reincarnate, or is there a process involved?
Well, just reincarnating is a very complex, unconscious process. See? Just reincarnating. See? So the process is always complex. In other words, we can't really see what's going on all the time. See? We're more or less the effect, as well as the cause of the process. But where we are in terms of being conscious as consciousness, or being conscious as effect, it's relative to our practice. And whether we practice in any way to know that, if we care about knowing anything.
Chapter 142, you write, knowledge of what soul is what liberates one from death and brings the death of liberation. What do you mean by the death of liberation?
What do you mean by you're concerned about the death of liberation? We're not talking about stopping the process of liberation. You can't stop the process of liberation. So the death of liberation is a deceptive phraseology in a sense. Liberation is liberation. Liberation is death, ongoingly. See? So the undoing, it's a radical undoing. Liberation is like self-liberating everything, moment to moment, with every breath, with every impulse. It's already gone. See? So there's no end that we can say is death of liberation. So it's a paradoxical phraseology that is humorous at best.
Does the death...
Liberation is a form of death, and death is a form of liberation, literally and actually as well.
Does the death process eventually bring about a sense of restfulness and peace for those who are experiencing it? Or are there those beings who cannot find rest and peace even a long time after experiencing death?
No, I think the practitioners make it very clear. Even in medical science today, and this is great about enlightened medicine, we're talking about states of mind where clinging is pain and releasing is peace, straight across the board. It's an absolute practically. Holding on is painful. Releasing, letting go, is pacifying in a sense. See, it's opening, letting be. So we're talking now about a word that is very important, being. We're not talking about being a certain thing or a certain time, or being, let's say, a particular object. We're talking about beingness. And that means being as it is, see? Just being. Zero. Being. Clear, free being. Coming.
Chapter 143, you write, with each man's ejaculation, there is
Not to change the topic too dramatically.
there is not only a loss of precious, vital, creative, psychic, sexual, or brain fluid, but also a corresponding loss of intelligence or consciousness. Mm-hmm. Are you implying that sex can essentially cause someone to become stupid?
Yes, absolutely. It's not an implication, I think. For many, too much of it is very, very stupid. Absolutely stupid. I mean, it's ignoring love, ignoring the heart completely. See? And we see that in many relationships. I mean, the evidence is just startlingly obvious. See? People are more into sexual release and amusement than loving one another. See? So people are just into the machinery of sex, which is right for everyone to enjoy, I guess, to a certain point, but it doesn't mean there's any love and healing particularly going on there. And women want love, and men need love. See? And sex is not going to get that. Sex is not love. It is not. It's a separate function. Now, of course, if you're in love and you have sex, that's really something that could enhance or maybe accentuate or extend whatever the heart is. But ordinarily, the two are very, very separate realities, very, very tragically so, and karmically so. See? They are separate. Now, what I want to add to this is that because I'm involved in the creative process, in the creative transmutation of sublimation of sexual energy into creative sound and light, then we're talking about, let's not be too ignorant about the sex function. See? The chakra system that everyone is, let's say, having some kind of opportunity to turn to in some form of wisdom direction can give us a sense that there's an ascending process from the lower chakras based around the bottom of the body, straight up through the brain. And so we're talking about the ascending and the descending forces that need to be properly understood and brought into creative functioning. But you have to have a certain kind of need to know that to get to that point. And that may be at the end of your road, but it should be at the beginning of your path, so as to not make too many mistakes along the way in thinking that, well, if you're not having enough sex, you're not loving yourself, you're not loving other people, and it's something we need to get really far beyond. To say, well, and if you're also not having sex, you might be saving yourself a whole lot of anguish as well. So suffering if you don't really know what that energy is for and what it could create in you or in somebody else.
For those who decide to stop indulging in sexual activity as part of their spiritual practice, will they notice an immediate difference in terms of recovering what has previously been lost, or is the process of recovery a gradual one?
Well, who wants to know? Say, who wants to know if that's the case? Most people are so impulsive because they have so much anxiety and frustration in them. They just want to have sex because that's their ideal form of release. See? That's their ideal gratification. It's the ultimate for people, see? And if they don't get off that way, they say, well, what's the purpose of life? I have to have my orgasm, I have to have this release, because they can't handle the energy, they can't handle their tension, they don't know what else to do with their tension and their frustration and their unhappiness, see? So that's because of a profound ignorance. They don't know that there's much more than that, see? And we have to have education that takes care of, let's say, this level of, or need to know, right at the very beginning of education. See, that sexual frustration is going to build up, and children in grade school should start to learn about that, because when they hit high school, they're going to be right in the thick of it at that point. They're going to be suffering from all of that, see? And they're not going to know what's going on because everybody's ignoring it. So, oh, you're just kids, go find out for yourselves. Go to the drive-in, have some booze or something. You'll figure it out. Go in the back seat of the car, you'll figure it out. It'll become more obvious to you. Well, it's often too late. It's probably also a big mistake. We need to have open intelligent discussion on all of these aspects of our sexual nature and our creative nature. See? We need higher intelligence programming.
Chapter 144, you write, death is the disintegration of those forces which act, interact, or react to serve the cohesion of the human organism and its subtle bodies. However, the practice of the law of being while alive ensures the disincarnating spirit not only an easier translation, but even a pleasurable one. What is the law of being?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure there's an answer to it, but if we take a moment to consider what is being itself, say, what is being, then I think we're getting closer to what the possibility is. What is supreme being? What is pure being? What is just being? See, what is basic being? See, what is basic being breathing? See, what is basic being nowness? What is basic being here-ness? See, what do these things mean? The law of being. See, being. See, being zero. See, being pure spirit, awareness. Law of being nothing, see, and thus being capable of everything else. See, it's good practice. Meditation is about and coming to zero, to be able to, at the highest level, focus on what it is that really needs to be done and can be done and should be done for yourself and for others, your family at least.
Chapter 145. You write, a good many so-called deaths are actually chromatic states where, except for the etheric connection, the body, for all practical and clinical purposes, appears to be dead, but the death is only partial. What about in the case of outer body experiences? Would this commonly be mistaken by others, specifically in the medical or scientific community, as death?
Well, it is possible that certain out-of-body conditions can be mistaken for death or something like death, because that was true in my case. So I know my mother was concerned about that. So any parent can have a child and it's this peculiar, let's say, a peculiar episode of having an out-of-body projection and not know what's going on. So it is possible, but we're talking about death as different stages and death by stages of death, and that's something we need to be prepared to understand. And I'm not sure the ordinary person is sufficiently educated in the stages of death to say that we as a society are properly educating ourselves relative to life and death, itself in the death process. I don't see evidence of that yet. I mean, I don't see evidence of proper sexual education and creativity education in schools. I mean, unless you pay a lot of money for it. But that should be made public, because it's in the public domain that we need to advance consciousness from street consciousness to, let's say, heart consciousness.
Are those spirits who are undergoing the initial stages of the death process just as perceptive of their surroundings and relations as when they were alive in the physical body?
Yes. Yeah, there's evidence to indicate that. That the perceptics continue, even though the body's dead, there's perceptics going on. But we're talking about this, having some knowledge of the stages of death, that there's sometimes and generally a slow withdrawing from the physical body. And we need to know that, just as in the paradoxical condition where you can see a person that seems to be functioning, they're gone. See? They're gone already, but they're not there, but they seem to be functioning. See? They're gone. See? Out of the body already. So we need to learn a little bit more about consciousness in the body and consciousness out of the body at some point. But right now, the way the society is set up, you have to find out about those things on your own if you're so inclined to. And that's not a problem, but it could be made easier for other people. Kids can be learning about these things. These things are important, not about, Jack and John and Mary and Jane playing with dolls and similar sort of childish nonsense. Go ahead.
Can a spirit incarnate on a lower plane than the earth plane?
Well, the earth plane itself can be, for some, the lowest possible plane, say. And then it's a matter of state of consciousness, see, because you have people here who, like for instance, we have enlightened beings, relatively enlightened beings, see, who are here on the earth plane. And they're here out of a mission, see, to assist less enlightened beings, suffering beings, help them awaken to higher states of consciousness. See. So we have higher beings coming down to this plane. This is definitely a lower plane for us. See. There are higher planes. Higher worlds we have no access to for the most part, until we pass or until we're so spiritually sensitive that we have access to it by our spiritual sensitivity. And there are enough psychics and people of that kind of level of sensitivity who can affirm and attest to and give testimony to higher planes. And it's not something where you have to have a near-death experience to find out to a certain degree by way of brain processes. I mean, we are spirits by nature, so being in and out of the body as a spirit is pretty natural. But we are not cultured in the let's say openness, proper openness to these types of phenomena. And so a lot of people, by way of culturing, are afraid to even talk about things such as that. So it's alien or exceptional. When these events happen, or people have these experiences, they say, wow, I hadn't known about experience, and all of a sudden it's like a shock, maybe. But it's totally natural for us to have these experiences. And some have them more than others, and it's all by nature, by the individual's progression and where they are in their life and circumstance that enables them to have certain types of experiences that are unique to their state of consciousness and not special or higher or lower in fact, but just unique to their state of consciousness. When you're ready, certain things are going to show up. And what you didn't know 2 seconds ago, you're going to know for real a second later. See? And if you see a ghost, if you had any paranoia about ghosts or doubts about ghosts, as soon as you have that kind of perception and you start seeing the vapors or something, I mean, you stop fearing it. Okay? You know it's for real. As soon as you see a spaceship, your mind has changed forever. Wow. Or even an astral vision of one. And you know it partially manifests. You see it become a little visible and you see it's for real. And it just shows up as a glow and then disappears. You know it's there and you know you're not hallucinating, right?